Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that comes to your living room once a month to give you the law, the Constitution, and current events. Tonight, we're lucky enough to have DeAnna Loraine, candidate for Nancy Pelosi's seat right here in San Francisco. And she's going to be telling us a little bit about her campaign and what she's been up to.
Former candidate, though, I remember. Yes. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone's doing really great despite these insane times that we're living in. I'm DeAnna Loraine, and I am on the front lines of this fight every single day. And it's just horrific. Our country has had so many trials, so many challenges, and for it to all just come to a head like this over this, it's just crazy, Mark. So thanks for having me on your show, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, maybe one of these days we'll get you in the studio. We're having a little bit of the COVID-19 government shutdown of the studio, so we're
Yes.
trying to do this all kind of remotely. But aren't you still a write-in candidate for for Pelosi's seat?
Well, leave it to crazy communist California to make up all these ridiculous election laws and processes that make it that much more difficult for anyone to actually
No,
win.
but you paid your money, right? You're a candidate.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
But when
somebody could
you're
write you in. I could write you in, right?
if you didn't win the primary, then no, you're not able to be written in.
Oh, you can't. Okay, so you can't be written. Okay. Oh well.
No,
Okay.
because California is stupid like that. They just want to make it that much more difficult for a Republican candidate to win an election,
Because
especially
when I'm
against.
voting and I don't like one of the candidates, I always just write myself in all the time.
Yeah, you should,
I
as you
never
should.
I never registered for anything. Okay, so anyway, so right now, what do you think is some of the biggest challenges facing the country? I mean, right now it looks like we have a kind of a the intersection of this COVID-19 uh, deal, and also we've got uh, the demonstrations, protests, looting. Well, what do you see coming from all this?
It's a sad state of affairs, Mark. It really is, because you have, on the one hand, we just have gotten through this insane period of COVID-19. And we're really still in it, though. But, we never could have imagined that our country, our economy would completely shut down and the world would shut down. It's like we all went on house arrest. And we could never really imagine, wow, masks, wearing a mask would need to be mandatory out of our house. We couldn't go to a restaurant. We couldn't go to a mall, sporting events, the sports industry, everything shut down. I think it almost feels really surreal because we've never encountered this before. It's unprecedented.
Well, I don't know. See, I used to work in a back T lab for a city. So actually, a couple of cities I worked in back T lab. So I'm pretty much used to this. And I think it was December. Yeah, it was December. I was in Denver, and my brother has done a lot of toxicology, and he gave me a mask. He says, "We're going to the airport, and we just happened to bump into someone from China who was going to Harvard and
Mm.
giving a lecture in Denver, who was from Wuhan, and so we had her mask. And we started talking about it. Says, yeah, it's a bioweapon that kind of got loose, and they've been
Mm.
working on this for many years. And for like 6 or 7 years, people saying you shouldn't be fooling around with it, right?
Mm.
And the people who said that kind of have all disappeared and been scrubbed. But yeah, this was a bioweapon design, and then it was released. And I guess you could look at it a couple of different ways, whether it was accidentally released or intentionally released. But
Mm.
when it's like you have a pistol. Sometimes they go off,
Mm.
accidentally, but usually you mean to shoot them when you shoot them. It's
Yeah.
pretty serious thing. So, December 17th, I saw this coming, and then I guess it got loose on November 17th. And then the public finally found out of it, what's in March or so, when they said, yeah, we've got a problem.
Mm.
But they really didn't want to admit that it came from a lab. They had some story about bats or something silly, which is just,
Right,
I
right.
mean, because if you look at the DNA strands, these are what the thing was the COVID-19 is the SARS virus with the DNA S protein spikes adapted into it. so it's more contagious. Luckily, they hadn't kind of worked out making the SARS more deadly. Usually, when you have a bioweapon, it's 90% lethal. This one's only 1% lethal. And then you start looking at the funding, of course. Obama put money into this lab, and Gates and Soros, our usual buddies, international globalists, put the money into it and did it. And of course, so that's what we got. So we got a little, and of course, the people want to sell the vaccine, which they just happened to have on hand right after the
right.
So anyway, that's a little knockback into the economy, and so a lot of companies are going bankrupt.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And but there is some federal relief on Chapter 11. If you look at Hertz, as a matter of fact, they did a bankruptcy at Chapter 11, and their stock dropped 80%. And that was on May 20th. But as of today, it's gone up 800%. So, they shed a lot of their debt and some of their non-performing units probably. And so there are ways out of it that, through the federal bankruptcy system where you can do a reorganization. And some, like some restaurants, I don't know if they can, they can get out of it. It's a deep hole. It's a deep hole when you have, a massive globalist, bioweapon attack. And then they have the looting and one thing or another, which is all.
Oh, that's another thing. It's like we just barely survived COVID. We're finally coming up to breathe. The country's starting to slowly lift restrictions, and then boom, George Floyd death. And now all of a sudden, within 24 hours, there's mass protests, there's mass riots, and not just any normal riots, but looting and burning of buildings and churches and stores, complete anarchy, attacking people. I mean, vicious attacks. And I've never seen so much destruction. I mean, these are like just savages that have just, ransacked town, going from city to city and just absolutely ransacking it. These images are horrifying. They look like they're in a third world country after a war. Some of these images and videos of New York City or LA, San Francisco, it's Oregon. It's really, really scary. And it just so much of this really does seem preventable, and so much of this seems like a larger agenda that is beyond just these coincidental organic events. Because every step of the way, we have the Democrats pushing their agenda, right? Oh, well, this is a great excuse for mail-in ballots. This is a great excuse to have everyone stay at home. But you can't do that. You can't say that anymore, especially with after the riots and the looting and protests, because if you're able to protest with thousands of people, then you are able to go and vote. COVID-19 is basically over because of these protests, right? And so any healthcare expert in a white coat on TV saying that COVID-19 is not over yet but they're cheering on these protests and riots are ridiculous. It's becoming a joke at this point. And then
because we were kind of lucky, San Francisco is famous for protests, right?
Yeah, of course.
There's usually a protest or two a week, and so the police are pretty good at it. And I can't go into too much detail of it, but I was talking to the sergeant in charge of homicides, and I've done homicide prosecution and attempted murder defense, and some homicide defense. So we were kind of chatting because we both worked on homicides. And he says we're really lucky this time because no cops were injured in the melee. The only people that were injured were looters breaking glass to get into, kind of trendy stores and that kind of thing. And I was thinking pretty embarrassing if you have a store that if you had the people break the windows and everything's free, you didn't get looted. But what's interesting about this, and I think they probably worked out pretty well this time, but generally what Antifa does, let's say you have a crowd of 3,000 people, right? And most of these people want to save the turtles, right? They want to save the world, save the turtles. Usually there's about 30 paid people, paid by Soros's Open Society, protected by the ACLU. These are agents probably paid $200,000 or $300,000 a year, weapons specialists, very good snipers, very good, espionage agents. They might have 30 of those in any one demonstration. They'll come the night before, put Molotov cocktails and pistols and rifles in the trash. They'll go through the security in the morning. And then when the crowd's there, they'll take the Molotovs and they'll throw it, let's say if a police line that's 40 feet in front of the Antifa terrorist, espionage agent, they'll throw the Molotov 20 feet in front of them, and then you'll have an old lady, saying, "Oh, save the turtles," and of
Yeah.
course her back will turn on fire, and so she'll rush the police line, and there'll be this massive rush of the police line, and of course, Soros and Open Society and the ACLU and the TV cameras all work for the same guy. They're all the
Right.
paymaster Soros.
Exactly.
All you got to do is look at who's Soros's funds, and you'll see who's doing this. And what's
Exactly.
interesting about Soros is he funds a lot of campaigns and he funds a lot of front organizations. But most of the money that these organizations get, I would posit, is money in the black. So if you're the ACLU and you get $1 million from Soros in the white, in other words, that's divulged, you'll probably get another 99 million in the black. Soros is involved in drug prostitution, syndicate, and he's got endless supply of cash. And most of that's black money. It's in the dark. And so, but giving them a contribution in the white gives him a reason to tell them what to do, right? So these people have unlimited cash.
Yeah.
In the billions easily, And so it's not like these Antifa guys are, like rubbing two sticks together to try to make a bomb. They've got plenty of things. And they're very efficient. And the people who end up rushing the cop and getting beat up by the cop, this old lady, save the turtle sign, well, that causes the next riot, right? She gets hit in the head and it's like, oh, the cops beat up an old lady. So
exactly.
It's all very orchestrated. And the guys breaking the windows aren't to save the turtle people. Well, that's Antifa.
Right.
They're paid $200,000 a year. They know what to tell the cops. They know how to evade the cops. But luckily this time there was no bombs. It was just the broken windows. And there was no shootings. Antifa sometimes shoots the protesters and blames it on the cops or shoots the cops. And what the worst thing is that Antifa will, Antifa, the Chekas, NKVD, the Wobblies, BLM, it's all the globalist Soros. It's just those
right. All of them.
and they're all paid by him, and they all take instructions from him. And another thing they'll do is they'll snipe. They'll set a fire when there's a riot, and they'll snipe firemen. When the firemen come. So that's some of the most despicable. But that's one reason that arson's kind of tricky in these demonstration, protest kind of things, because the cops, the firemen really don't want to show up, because they think, well, there might be snipers. So, so that's kind of what you've got. You've got basically an espionage insurgency. You've got a military insurgency going on in this country, run by Soros, and there's probably a third or half of the Congress that's paid by Soros too, right?
Yep.
That are on his payroll, and they get all kinds of kickbacks that you wouldn't even believe. I'm not going to go into them, but Pelosi's going to get plenty of kickbacks. If you look at her dad, D'Alessandro, how he ran Baltimore and his relation to Lecca Luciano and the heroin business, it's quite an interesting history. Being the queen pin of heroin and fentanyl, and also having to be a senator passing out syringes. And
I know.
You can just look down. You can just walk down the street.
Yeah.
San Francisco and see the heroin. It's just obvious, right? This is the heroin mecca. And that heroin comes right over the border from Mexico, starts off in Afghanistan, comes up Highway 5, takes a right and goes to Sacramento, and comes here. And this is, heroin mecca. And also Nancy does all these little trips to China to pick up the fentanyl, bring the fentanyl in. So, these folks have a lot of money, and they sure don't want to close the border, because that would keep the drugs and, the new prostitutes from coming in. And they make a lot of money at this. So, that's what you're dealing with. San Francisco, LA, they're basically demilitarized zones. The American government militarily doesn't control these zones anymore. You're on your own. The streets are, they're demilitarized. It's just, it's a war zone is what we've got. And that's what we got. So it's, you got to be careful. But the cops have done a really good job, put up with a lot of harassment and a lot of to try to goad them into do something, try to make them act. And they've been pretty patient with all this stuff.
Yeah.
If you watch the videos, they've been very patient.
Yeah, and now they're talking, defund the police, disband the police. It's insane. But what's crazy is half of America thinks this is okay. They're saying, yeah, sounds great. I know that a lot of them are professional agitators and professional protesters, but it's amazing that, if you're on the left right now, if you call yourself a Democrat, you're aiding and abetting this behavior. And if you're not speaking up, I mean, at this point, silence is complicit. They always tell us that silence is complicit. But on their side, too, I mean, if they're not openly saying, this is wrong, like I don't, because if for me and Republicans were just calling for something over and over again that was just so ridiculous, and not just once, like disband the police, but everything else that that the left has been saying lately. I just couldn't stand by that party anymore. They would never have my vote again. And disbanding the police is at a time where we probably need them most, but and then equating police with police brutality, and saying that really they're desperately painting this narrative that all police are bad, all police are brutal, and it's just a really sad thing to see, especially coming up in their election. Here we got a couple more months to the election, and it does, if you look at the trends, Black Lives Matter only becomes popular right before election season, or right in election season.
Well, I think that we've got a lot of things going on. One are these little skirmishes and the bioweapon attacks, which are, things that globalists like to do when they want to distract. I mean, there's all kinds of hearings on Capitol Hill, what happened in the last administration, and they don't want that to be the news, so they let loose a bioweapon. They've got some other hearings about what was going on with Comey and all these characters, and Clapper and all these guys who did a coup d'etat, really, or mutiny. What do we call it, a mutiny? These are armed people, so this is a mutiny, a hanging offense, and that we don't want anyone seeing that. So we'll talk about people breaking windows. But I really kind of disagree on the Democrats and the Republicans and the blacks and the whites. I think we're all in it together, and I think it's a question of what does 2 + 2 equal, right? Some people are saying 2 + 2 is 4, and some people saying 2 + 2 is 5. And if you look at Google, right, which is owned by Soros, if you look at YouTube, which is owned by Soros, if you look like Facebook,
what isn't owned by Soros?
And if you look like Twitter, which is owned by Soros, I call that gift, right? Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, that's gift. That's completely a psyop propaganda. So if you believe anything that goes through there, I mean, it's been heavily censored and changed. I mean, the perception of reality, and also you've got to understand, when people see a video, it's not like reading a book. It's very hard to tell when the human mind sees a TV or a movie that that's not reality. When you read a book, you say, okay, you make your own movie in your head, right? But most people in the country now have been brainwashed with these movies coming over the phone or their computer or the TV. And they actually believe that some of this stuff is true. I mean, I would say anything you see on Google, anything you see on Facebook, anything you see on YouTube, anything you see on the news is almost certainly untrue, because they're trying to sell you something. They're not working for you. If you're not paying them, why should they be working for you? They're working for somebody else, and that someone else wants you to think of certain things so they can make money off you or whatever. So I think what I see is like it's kind of a differential between people who read books and people who get all their information from the video screen. Most people who they actually believe, in my point of view, right, that 2 + 2 is 5. I believe 2 + 2 is 4. And so if I tell someone 2 + 2 is 4, they'll say, well, you're a rotten bigot, you're a misogynist, you're a racist, you're a baby killer, da, 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 and I'm going to kill you and I hate you. So you better say 2 + 2 is 5. And I say, no, it's 2 + 2 is 4. And they say, well, prove it. And I'm saying, well, the proof is obvious, right? So, I mean, I think that's where we are. And I think if you really wanted to change things in country, you would have Attorney General Barr go after the gift for monopoly. There's got to be an antitrust violation there. I mean, why does Google run all the information? Not only do they run all the information, everything you say on your phone they can sell all your information. I've argued with a Google lawyer at a lawyer seminar, and I said, wait a minute, I pay for my Gmail. You can't sell that information to my opponent. He goes, oh yeah, we can. We're Google. He goes, it's the same thing like your secretary can open your mail And I said, but my secretary signs a confidentiality agreement. She can't divulge anything that happens in my office. And he goes, well, we're Google. So Google can sell and take and spy on anything you do. And even if you have that phone off, they can hear everything, right? And they sell that information. So they're an incredible and powerful. And not only that, they've got a certain, I forget the actual code, but you can't sue them, right? They're immune from suit. That was passed.
Right.
And they have and also they get all kinds of tax money. So it's like, wait a minute, these guys aren't on our side. We pay for them, and with our taxes, and plus they're immune from suit. So I think if you had an antitrust and you broke up how come there's not 70 Google? I mean, or at least 10 baby dolls, right? I think Google has to be broken up. Facebook has to be broken up. YouTube they all have to be broken up into a dozen smaller companies so there's some competition. And I think that'd be huge. The other thing is how do you stop people from rioting and looting and believing that stuff? I think that, they're saying, oh, the blacks got such a rough deal from the white Christians. Okay, white Christians lynched, 2,000 black slaves over 400 years. But the Khazarians, right? The Aaron Lopez on that triangle on that atrocity where they were bringing rum and guns and slaves. That's Aaron Lopez. Those are Schumer's guys. Those are Soros's guys, right? They captured 110 million black slaves. They mass murdered 20 million of them, right? And they cut their ears off of 12 million of them. They took 24 million ears, put them in bags, wrote in the ship logs, and you can go and look at the ship's logs. There's 24 million ears they cut off because they threw those slaves that they raped and starved and beat to death overboard. So that's your Schumer, Schiff, Soros people. They mass murdered 20 million black slaves. And they're giving white Christians a hard time about lynching 2,000 over 400 years. And not only that, because this whole anti-lynching thing was the Jesse Smollett thing, right? Because he got lynched and they passed the anti-lynching thing. Well, why don't we have a bill, the anti-rape and beat and whip someone to death and cut their ears off bill? Let's talk about the 20 million that the Soros, Schumer, Schiff people killed. And then, because that's 10,000 more than the white Christians. But that's not in any book. It's in the books on the ship's logs. If you looked at Aaron Lopez's letters and logs, you'll see it. But the point is, that's the suppressing. That's never on Google. You won't see that on Google. You're not going to see that on YouTube. You're not going to see that in the schools. And you've got the same thing, the same bunch, Soros and these guys in the gulags and the Holodomor. 84 million white Christians. Right. Disarmed, non-combatants were killed in there. But we don't ever have, there's no movies about that. So the thing is that we live in a movie that 2 + 2 = 5 world. That's what I would say. Yeah. And in order to do that, you've got to say you got to have equal movies. You got to have equal Google with Soros, because Soros is spinning this tale. That's, as far as I'm concerned, is 2 + 2 is 4.
Of course he is. Yeah. And people are buying into it. It's like you have to cut off the head of the Hydra, which is Soros and all of his societies. And I wish and I hope that Trump has the cojones to cut that off at the source, because I know that there's been other countries that have forbid Soros from participating in them and has banished them. We still don't know for sure how much that helps, but I think, it's really time for a world leader, our president, to step up and make a real difference here, because otherwise it's just going to keep on going. It's a cancer that spreads, and we're never going to truly be free as people. We haven't been truly free as people for decades in America.
Well,
we have the illusion of freedom.
1913 was the coup d'etat that kind of got rid of the American Republic,
right,
replaced by the globalists, these folks. That was president, I think it was Wilson. But we had a very weak president, and then they did the income tax amendment, which didn't pass, but they passed it anyway. Right. 6 states had a different amendment. Well, that didn't pass, but they passed it on Christmas Eve. They created the FBI out of thin air. There's no such thing. And, they created the Federal Reserve out of thin air. The Soros folks borrowed $6 million or $20 million from the government and then lent it back to us. and now they pull 96 cents out of the dollar and we get 4 cents. So no wonder everyone's working 3 jobs. So I mean,
Yeah.
we've been in this weird kind of 2+2=5 world since 1913. And if you
Yep.
look at the value of the dollar in 1913, the dollar was worth 100 cents. Now it's worth 4 cents, right? And that 96 cents didn't go into thin air.
Mhm.
It went to the source. That's who's got it. That's why you got to work 3 jobs. That's why used to be a milkman could buy a 4-bedroom house and have 4 kids, and his wife didn't have to work, right? And you could buy a house after 4 or 5 or 6 years or 10 years with the salary as a blue collar.
Mhm.
You can't do that now because we don't have anybody. Our currency has been debased, right?
Yeah.
By this globalist Soros. They've taken that value, and so it's kind of like, why are we having? Nobody can even tell you who owns the Federal Reserve, who's the
Mhm.
stockholders. Nobody can tell you.
Right.
I mean, it's a secret. I mean, what? And it's
Yeah.
unconstitutional for them even to be printing money. The Congress is supposed to print our money, our coinage. So, I mean,
Exactly.
this is something that's been going on for a long time. But I think the main thing, the problem we have in the present is that the movies and the videos are so pervasive and so convincing that even if there's a book that's real history, people see the movie and they believe the movie.
Of course, and that's what's so tragic about it. And they're training younger generations to be radical leftist, communist activists, which is all the more scary. But so until we cut off the heads of the snakes, we're going to just keep on seeing the same thing over and over again. Even if we vote, Republican or Democrat, there's the whole shadow government there that's controlling the puppet strings, behind
Well,
the scenes.
also, I think you have,
Really.
maybe you run into it, and I don't know if you want to go into that, but as a Republican candidate, you ran into some rhinos, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, even my only Republican opponent in the race, I believe, was a rhino. He certainly acted like a rhino. He certainly talked like a rhino and attacked me like a rhino.
No,
He
but the thing
spent
is, how many times has this guy run against Nancy?
4 times now. This is
And
his
then
fourth time running against
he
Nancy.
hasn't really done all that
And,
well.
and no, he keeps losing miserably every time.
But I
And
mean,
this
doesn't
time,
he get paid? In a way, doesn't he get paid to lose?
I would think so. I think that
No, but I
you
mean,
at this point.
he's the head of the election committee, right? And then he runs himself, and he kind of gets paid to lose, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's the chair of the local GOP, and then he's
Yeah, so
also
that's
running
kind of a
himself, so
conflict of
paying himself.
interest, I would say. Yeah,
Oh, 100% it's a conflict of
and
interest.
he'll
But
probably be
he'll
running for the
probably
next
run
10
again.
years. He'll probably run for the
Yeah,
next 10
I would.
years.
I'll imagine that he's going to be running for the next 10 years. As long as Nancy's in office, he'll run against her, raise a bunch of money,
Yeah,
do
Nancy
his
is
thing.
Nancy is a piece of cake. I mean, it's amazing, what she says. It's like I'm saying, as far as I think, when I hear Nancy talk, it's kind of like 2+2=5. I can't even really put it together. Nothing she
Yeah.
really says is sequitur. I mean, it's
Mhm.
nonsense. I mean, I maybe I'm just wrong, or I'm biased, but
No, she's
just looking
she's
at the
a
sentences, it
wicked
doesn't make a
woman.
lot of sense.
Well, it does make sense when you look at what the agenda is, because she's
Uh,
not stupid, she's strategic. And
right.
it appears like she is sloppy. It appears like she's this dumb, crazy, drunk woman. But really, she's being strategic. She's simply delivering the agenda of the Marxist left. And
Uh,
she's a great mouthpiece for them. She's the messenger. And she's great at riling people up. It's funny because on her side, everyone thinks she's a goddess. On our side, we think she's the Wicked Witch of the
well, I
West.
mean, I don't know if she's the Wicked Witch, but I mean, I think she's definitely
Pretty
on the
wicked.
take. I mean, I think she's definitely a traitor and on the take, and she's working
Yeah,
with the globalists, and she's betrayed her own constituency.
100%.
But I think that maybe she just acts so weird, so it's like, well, you shouldn't criticize her because she's a little.
Well, she's an old lady, kind of like
She's
Joe
well,
Biden, how he's
she's a little
senile and
retarded. She's mentally
yeah.
retarded and doesn't quite have it together, so it's not nice to criticize her. Maybe that's the shtick.
Mhm.
I just don't know, but it's some very strange stuff. But yeah, what is 17 terms? She's had 17 terms, I think.
Yeah, I mean, she's been
34
in
years.
Congress since I was a toddler, and what has she really
34 years.
accomplished? Yeah,
Well, you can
she's
just
been.
walk down San Francisco streets and see what she's
Yeah,
accomplished. Like people
there's
shooting
her
up,
accomplishments,
dying, and
right?
like going to the bathroom to see.
Needles and drugs.
kind of too disgusting to even describe, but it is, you know,
She's an insider. I mean, and
Yeah.
she fans the flames, just like Maxine Waters, just like Adam Schiff, you know, fans the flames of racism. She's a race baiter. She fans the flames of feeling so much sympathy for the kids in cages and illegal immigrants, but completely ignores American citizens and the homeless epidemic and the opioid problem. So she just instigates things to keep these tensions going
Well, I would
and
say
keep
Nancy
all the
is,
focus and attention away from the real problems
yeah,
America are
Nancy
facing.
is the opioid problem. She's the queen of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So yeah, she is the opioid,
Drug
but I mean,
running and whatnot.
and I think what's also very interesting, if you look at the FBI statistics, and we've done shows about, you know, the cops killing black people or killing Mexicans,
Mhm.
what the FBI statistics did under Comey, they conflated white Christians with Hispanics, and they called them all white. And so you couldn't, it was kind of blurry because, you know, the US government doesn't want to admit we've got roughly about 50 million illegal aliens, Hispanics in our
Mhm.
country. Most of them voting Democrat and most of them on welfare and, you know, taxing the
Mhm.
system very heavily. Um, which is a reason that if you're poor and white, you know, you don't get a good school or a good hospital or one thing or another. But those are reliable Democratic voters because coming from Mexico and South America, those are very communist country, and they're going to vote what they're used to doing.
Mhm.
Um, but the point is that uh, these these are the core voters. I mean, 100% Americans don't want to vote for the Democrats anymore, right? They've
Mhm.
got to import these 50 million people to vote. That's a lot of
Exactly.
people. Because when you're
And
looking
dead
at
people.
when you yeah, dead people, well, you don't have to import those. You just have to wait till they die and then they
Yeah.
switch parties. But I mean, you got to say though, like a lot of elections are turned on a couple thousand votes, and if you import 50 million people and give them free everything, well, it's not really free everything. The American citizen taxpayer is, you know, under pain of death, forced to give up their
Mhm.
honestly earned income to bribe these people to vote Democrat.
Mhm.
But that's, you know, I think that's pretty much espionage and treason. And you know, if you're in this country and you're not supposed to be, and you're voting or you're collecting any money, that's espionage, right?
Mhm.
So that's something that's got to be taken care of. Now, it's interesting that to put a wall up or one thing or another, but you still got 50 million people at large who are
Right.
here, and they say, well, who's going to pick the strawberries? Well, you know, I'm allergic to strawberries. I don't need strawberries. You know, we
Mhm.
don't need, you know, we don't need espionage agents in the country. We don't need one of them, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a single one. Now, there's a lot of them that Obama brought in, like the Syrian, well, the fake Syrians. I don't, you know about the Syrian passports, right? The
Mhm.
ISIS, whoever, you know, they were kind of like Soros globalists. They took over the Syrian passport
Mhm.
printing presses, right? And they got
Yeah.
the presses, and that's how you got these 10 million Syrians, right? They're no
Right.
more Syrian than I am, right? You know, this is
Mhm.
ridiculous, you know. But they produce like 10 million fake Syrian passports, but they're not fake. They're from the printing press, right?
Mhm.
So that's how you got all these Syrians. And, you know, they weren't born in Syria, right?
Right.
And so you produce 10 million refugees, right? But they're just espionage agents, right?
Right.
So, you know, those all have to go back, all of them, every single one. So, I mean, if you're, you know, a foreigner, you didn't come here properly, you got to go back. If you're an espionage agent with a fake Syrian, you know, I mean, there's like 50 or 60 million people in the country, pretty questionable. And you can look what's happened to Europe. I mean, Europe's been overrun. It's a mess, you know. It's
Mhm.
really a demilitarized zone. It's not safe to walk in the street. You get raped,
Totally.
killed. We're about, you know, we're a few months from that, you know, a few months of progression on this thing where you have unlimited foreign invasion. You know, it's not very long to you're, you know, you get overrun. And so we're right on the tipping point. So we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
I think that you know, Trump was very naive when he came in, you know, and
Mhm.
he thought that most of the people in the government weren't traitors and mutineers.
Mhm.
Turns out, you know, I forget, there's 60, 70 million people who work for the government. I mean, there's millions, tens of millions. I
Mhm.
think lay them all off and start from scratch. You know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't really trust one of them. You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't trust. I mean, I worked with the FBI 30 years ago, but so what? Everyone gets laid off and you rehire. You can rehire the good ones, you know. But I don't see how these 70 million people get to stay there. For one thing, okay, if you're an FBI agent and you didn't blow the whistle on what Comey was doing, either you're a lousy investigator, right? You know, or you're a traitor. Okay. I mean, or you're a coward, right? So you're either a coward, a traitor, or a real lousy or a blind investigator, right?
Yeah.
So why should we have you work for the FBI? So I would say lay off absolutely everybody that ever worked for the FBI.
Exactly.
And hire sheriffs to run this. You know, people, you could get elected sheriffs. But I think that's the kind of thing we need, because once you're corrupted, once you're part of the mafia, you know, you're in a bad situation because you took the bribe, you took the money. And if you rat, dead canaries cannot sing, but they're not just going to kill you. If you work for the FBI and you say this is what Comey did, they're going to kill your family. You know, they're going to kill your cousins and uncles and your mom and your dad and your brothers and your sisters, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and then they're going to, like, if you, like, whatever Soros's wife, you know, you'll end up with those little red handkerchiefs and hanging from a doorknob like Epstein. You know, you'll get, like,
I know,
hang yourself from a doorknob after they kill your family. So, you know, once you're dirty, you're dirty. They all got to go. And you would be surprised. I would say most of the federal bureaucracy is dirty. You know, they're
absolutely,
and they got to go. And there's no way you can change that, you know, until they're gone. There's no way you're going to have anything work well until you get new blood in there, because they took the money. I don't know. Did you ever see what was the movie The Border? You ever see The Border? Jack Nicholson. It's a great movie. But anyway, so they're taking, you know, whatever, smuggling people over the border, and Harvey Keitel is kind of corrupting Jack Nicholson. It's a great movie. And so anyway, you know, they're letting people over, and and they're saying, well, we're a little worried about Jack Nicholson. I forget what it is, but and the other guy goes, well, he took the money, and you know, but the head mafia goes, that's only money. So they set it up so you know, a truck full of illegal aliens die in the truck. So now he's looking at a dozen murder charges. Right now he's in.
sure.
So you know, we're not playing with you know, we're not playing wiffle ball here. You know, these people are mutineers and gangsters and mass murderers. They got powerful by murdering and stealing, and it's all they know how to do. And they're not going to start training puppies and playing by the rules. You know, they're not. They will. They will. So I mean, that's kind of what America's up against. We got a bunch of gangsters and traitors and mutineers in charge, running stuff, and you know, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. So we'll see what happens in the next elections. If we get elections, I guess we'll have mail elections, and then probably one.
Hope not. I know, right? Well, that's a good topic for next time, because we are going to follow up, I think, like Obamagate and all the things going towards the election. I think is going to be very, very interesting. Like in 2 months from now, as everything is going to come to a head, which I think it will. I think the left is going to do everything possible, deploy all of their weapons, and it's going to get uglier before it gets better, I think. And
well,
we'll see what
Killer
really
Beast
happens.
didn't work so well, but we'll see what is up their sleeve for next week.
Yeah, killer
I think
murder
we got to
hornet.
wrap up. We got to wrap up, and I'm really glad you could come on the show.
Me
One
too.
of these days we're
It's
going
always
to
great
get
to be
in the
here.
studio, but
Yeah.
you know, these are kind of
Crazy
interesting
times.
We got to adapt. So I'm really happy you could come on the show again. Good
Of
talking to you.
course, it's great to be here.
And then, oh wait, you've got a book that's coming out. What's the name of the book?
I do. It is Defeating Nancy Pelosi, and it's all about my challenge, my congressional run against Nancy Pelosi and the swamp, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what I went through fighting the swamp, and really, you know, why we need to fight, why ordinary people need to rise up to the challenge right now and to fight for the America that we know and love. We've got to take back America. So the book is going to be out in July.
When's the book coming out?
July 7th.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's great. So you're going to send me a copy?
Of course. Signed, autographed copy.
Okay, great to have you, and we'll see you next time. And to the audience, good night, and hope everybody's home and safe and doing fine. And we'll see you in the next show.